really, who could blame them? The headlining fight is amazing. The card is pretty stacked, and even the undercard, there's something to watch in just about every fight. Absolutely. Whether it's guys who are exciting, top prospects, it's going to be a good night of fights.
Absolutely. Let's just go from the top, and then once we get to the prelim cards, we can pick and choose from Fox Sports and Fight Pass which ones we think are worth talking about. But the line, I really got to know the line right off the bat on Hendricks and Lawler. Where does it stand right now?
Right now, Johnny Hendricks, and this is going to be a trend throughout this cards. Johnny Hendricks is a bigger favorite than he should be. He's minus 360 right now, and Robbie Lawler is plus 300. So, as I said, the line higher than it should be. Actually, there was a point on Sunday where Robbie Lawler got as high as plus 450, which was absolutely insane. I threw down some of my money at that point because I see this as a close fight with a slight edge to Johnny Hendricks because obviously Hendricks is the better wrestler. Who knows how much he's going to want to wrestle in this fight, though. Obviously, the judge's decision didn't go too well for him against Georges St-Pierre, so he might be wanting to put a little bit of a stamp on this fight and try and finish it, which means he's going to stand with Robbie Lawler. And that's not going to go too well for a whole lot of fighters in the UFC.
No, they both have one-punch knockout power, and we've seen Lawler do it many times over his career, and we've seen Hendricks do it several times of late in his career in UFC. So if it comes down to one-punch knockout power, I would give a narrow edge to Hendricks, but boy, that could go either way if they get in a slugfest.
Yeah, and I was actually watching, it's programmed on the Fight Network up here in Canada, and it's a breakdown by Robin Black, who he used to be a musician in Canada, but he's also fought quite a bit, and he does really good analysis.
Right,
and
we've actually had him on the show before as a guest.
Oh, there you go. Did you play his music as well?
No, we didn't get a chance to play his music, but we got a chance to talk to him about the fight series that he was doing play-by-play for at the time.
Yep, yeah, so that might have been the Score Fighting series.
Yes, it was, yes.
Yeah. I went to quite a few of those cards because they were all scattered around the Ontario area. But he does really good breakdowns. I think he's actually one of the more underrated analysts in the sport.
Oh, yeah.
And he did one this week just on how the striking's going to play out because both these guys are southpaws. Johnny Hendricks tends to rely on his straight left, which works great against right-handed fighters, but against southpaws, a little bit more difficult to land. Well, Robbie Lawler, even though he fights in the southpaw stance, his best shots are really his right hook and his right uppercut. So he's going to have the ability and the opening to get those off a little bit more than Hendricks is. So going to be a very, very interesting fight, I think.
So it seems to me it might actually be to Hendricks' advantage then to take Lawler down.
Absolutely. I think that's Hendricks' best way to win. I'm not going to say his only way to win because we've seen the insane power that Johnny Hendricks has, but if he wants to really win this fight and become champion, I think he goes out there and he wrestles.
Probably so. But what's it looking like with Condit and Woodley in the co-main event? I know you said they're all a little longer than they should be, so if I had to place a guess right now, that means Condit's probably a little high.
He's not that high. He's at minus 190 right now with the comeback on Woodley at plus 165. So
yeah, that's not super long. That's pretty even.
Yeah, nothing too crazy. But the issue here is that this fight is only 3 rounds. If this fight was 5 rounds, then you could set Condit at minus 800 and probably be safe because
that cardio he has is insane.
Exactly. I think I would probably pick Carlos Condit to beat any fighter at welterweight right now in a 5-round fight. So, as a 5-round fight, I think that it would be great. Condit would be a great bet, but over 3 rounds, I can very easily see Tyron Woodley wrestling him for a couple of rounds, winning those rounds, and then even if he gets tired in the thirds, Condit might not have enough time to come back and get the finish.
So would you say this is your money line then? Would you encourage people to bet on Woodley in this?
No, I wouldn't encourage them to bet Woodley. I think if you're going to bet Woodley, the best bet would probably be Woodley by decision, but even that is only plus 240 right now, so you're not getting a ton of extra value there. But one thing that would probably be a good bet when the line comes out is the Woodley points handicap. So that would mean it's kind of like betting a spread in football or any other sport. That would mean you're predicting the fight to be a 29-28 type of fight instead of a 30-27 type of fight.
And that's definitely a possibility in this one, especially if it plays out the way you suggest, where it would be 2 rounds of wrestling and 1 round on the feet, then it could easily turn out to be just that.
Yeah. And really that 29-28 could go either way. Even if Woodley starts to tire in the second round and he loses the second and the third, that's a bet that's still going to cash, so.
Oh, so it doesn't matter who gets the 29-28, just the score at the end.
Yeah, so basically what it's saying is the bet would be Tyron Woodley plus 3.5 points. Gotcha. So as long as he loses by 3 or less on the total judges' scorecards, then that bet would win.
Well, that's definitely an interesting bet if you want to play it. Then what's the line like on Diego Sanchez and Miles Jury right now?
Diego Sanchez is a small underdog. He's plus 150, and Miles Jury is minus 170, which I think is a fair line. But when you're looking at Diego Sanchez fights, you know that chances are it's going to decision because he is damn near impossible to finish. Mm-hmm. And the judges love Diego's style. So it's tough to bet Miles Jury here, even though I think that he's the better fighter at this point in their careers. It's still going to be tough to bet him.
Yeah, and there's probably not a whole lot of fights where people aren't willing to put a little money on Diego just because of the fact that he's absolutely crazy and he's very hard to finish, as you said. It's one of those things where he's a guy who actually gets better as fights get longer, and I don't know if that's his cardio or it's just his never say quit attitude, but like in that third round with Ellenberger, he looked better than he had the first two.
Yep, the third round with Ellenberger, he took his back, he got him in some tough spots. The third round against Gilbert Melendez, he hurt him.
Oh yeah.
It's a recurring theme in his career, so Diego Sanchez definitely turns up the heat as the fights go, and it's going to be another case of that because Miles Jury doesn't have great stopping power, and even if he did, as I said, Diego Sanchez, last time he got stopped was when BJ Penn opened a chasm on his forehead.
Right. So yeah, that's pretty much the only way you're going to stop Diego is to get a doctor to come in and help you with that.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, what do we got with Jake Shields and Hector Lombard in the welterweight tilt?
Jake Shields and Hector Lombard. This is a very intriguing line to me because another one where I think the favorite is too high. Hector Lombard right now, he's minus 220, and Jake Shields is plus 180. And you can look at the fight and you can say, oh, Hector Lombard's going to stop the takedowns and knock him out. But you could also have said that about Tyron Woodley when he fought Jake Shields, Dan Henderson when he fought Jake Shields, basically any number of people when they fought Jake Shields.
I like to always say, sorry to interrupt, I always like to say Jake Shields makes good fighters look bad.
Exactly. He goes out there and he just has a way of nullifying what people do. Sometimes he does it with takedowns, sometimes he does it with pressure up against the cage, sometimes he even does it by standing at range and throwing those leg and body kicks that don't have a whole lot on them, but they score points with the judges. So Jake Shields, right now, it's not quite high enough for me to bet, but I'm definitely taking a good hard look at that line because if Hector Lombard doesn't get the finish within the first 3 or 4 minutes in this fight, I think it's going to be a rough night for him.
Yeah, Lombard is not one of those guys who turns up the heat as the fight gets longer. He seems to gas out really quick. Yeah,
exactly. So, I was talking a little bit about the Tyron Woodley by decision line. One decision prop that I do like is Jake Shields wins by decision is plus 335 right now.
Wow. Yeah, that is a pretty tempting offer.
Yeah.
So what do we have with Ovince St. Preux versus Nikita Krylov at light heavyweight?
Same story. I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but Ovince St. Preux, in his last fight, he took on Cody Donovan, who Cody Donovan isn't the most skilled fighter in the world, and he had OSP in a little bit of trouble early on in that fight. So Ovince St. Preux, he's not the most consistent or the best fighter out there, but even still, he's a minus 365 favorite here.
Wow.
So he is actually a slightly bigger favorite than Johnny Hendricks at this point. And, say what you will about Nikita Krylov. I don't think he's a particularly great fighter. I don't really understand why this fight is on the pay-per-view main card.
But I have a theory on that, but please continue.
All right. But he's got some power. Obviously, he showed that. He got in shape for his last fight, and he knocked out Walt Harris in 30 seconds. So I'm not going to lay minus 365 on a guy like OSP when he's facing someone who has knockout power.
Yeah, he only needed 25 seconds in Chicago. Anybody can get a finish in 25 seconds. That's somebody you got to keep your eye on.
Yep, yeah, exactly. So, like I said, I don't think he's the greatest fighter in the world, but this isn't just a gimme fight for OSP.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'll tell you my theory. Peter and I have discussed this on a couple of recent shows. They feel like whenever they have a prelim card airing on television, they've got to have a really big lead-in for people to stay tuned for the pay-per-view. And it seems a case of doing that again here with Fox Sports 2, because they've got Kelvin Gastelum and Rick Horror's story in the main event right before, and that's arguably a pay-per-view worthy fight, but I'm betting that they switched these two bouts just so they could have a great lead-in for the pay-per-view.
Yes, I would definitely agree with that, and I think that it has something to do with the contract that they've got with Fox and Fox Sports, that they're supposed to put a solid fight on as the prelim headliner. But I think this is a pay-per-view quality fight, and I think this one deserves to be maybe even on the main card ahead of Diego Sanchez and Miles Jury as well. So this could be almost an entirely welterweight pay-per-view card if they wanted to structure it that way. But, we end up getting Gastelum and Story for free.
Yeah, and I'm not going to complain, and I imagine very few people are, because Kelvin Gastelum has really shown himself to not just be an Ultimate Fighter winner, but a serious prospect on the rise. He's in great shape. He's got great power. His wrestling is not to be questioned, but Rick's story is a long time and a lot of fights and a lot of big wins under his belt.
Yeah, and the line sort of shows that, because a lot of people think that Gastelum is on the way up. He's still a very young fighter, a lot of potential, and he's gotten a little bit of love early on. He's actually minus 180 right now. Rick Story's plus 150. So I think, again, the fight is pretty close to a pick'em fight, but I do lean slightly towards Kelvin Gastelum.
I would as well. Now, any other fights on this Fox Sports 2 card that you think we should delve a little deeper into?
Yeah, there's a couple of fights that I really like on this card. Not necessarily the fights, but there's a couple of fighters to keep an eye on for sure. Alex Garcia, he looked phenomenal in his UFC debut, as did Justin Scoggins. So both of those guys are more than 4-1 favorites at this point, so they're expected to come through again. But I think the potential best fight on the prelim card is between Dennis Bermudez and Jimmy Hedis. I think that has the potential to be maybe even fight of the night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Bermudez has a good record going for him of late. I don't think he's lost since 2011.
Yeah, I think his last loss was actually that Ultimate Fighter finale against Diego Brandao.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, momentum definitely working in his favor, but I guess, I don't know where I feel about Hedges, because he beat Nanfan, and a lot of guys beat Nanfan these days, so that's not exactly one to crow about. And then he lost to Marcus Brimage, but it was a decision. And, it's like, I don't know if we've seen Jimmy Hedges at his very best yet. He's got a great record at 11-1, but I'm waiting for him to get a really quality win.
And honestly, I think this could be that spot. You look at this fight, and no matter where it happens, if it's on the feet, I think Bermudez is a little bit better, but Hedges has been improving. First of all, he's very tough. Obviously, he took a little bit of a beating in that Brimage fight and just kept coming forward. And he's also got a reach advantage, and he's a southpaw here, which are two very big factors when you're looking at the striking. So on the feet, I think it's going to be pretty close, and on the ground, I do think that Hetties is the better grappler, but this is going to be another case where Dennis Bermudez is going to be the one getting takedowns and going to be in top position. So could be a case where even if people think Hetties does the better work, the judges might not agree.
That's true. We could have another one of those DC Dakota Cochran type fights, very, very potentially in the works here.